Coming in at 5, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Penned by Alvin Schwartz, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a series of 3 collections of short horror stories for children. Yes, I say children, but that does not diminish the horror this book houses, which is the reason it was banned from shelves for the majority of the 90s. Alvin Schwartz drew heavily from folklore and urban legends for his stories which are influenced by the likes of T.S. Eliot, Mark Twain, and even Shakespeare. Now, as previously stated, this series is listed by the American Library Association as being one of the most challenged books of all time, specifically in the 90s. Complaints were made about its violence, disturbing subject matter, unsettling artwork, and potential unsuitability for younger readers, and of course, religious concerns. As a book that was originally aimed towards children, the topics of murder, disfigurement, and even cannibalism were met with rage by parents and readers, with one reader even calling it sick, repulsive, and really disgusting. Among the groups who have attempted to ban the book completely are Parents, Women of America, the American Library Association, and the Bulletin of the Center for Children's Books. In 1993, during an interview with the Chicago Tribune, a former elementary school teacher stated, "If these books were movies, they'd be R-rated because of the graphic violence. There's no moral to them. The bad guys always win." What truly haunted readers and made it a tome passed down from generations to generations was the haunting artwork by Stephen Gammell, which features incredibly unsettling black and white images, including grotesque sewer rats, a young woman with spiders crawling out of her cheeks, and of course the eerie shot of a scarecrow with a noose hanging around its neck. The book has since been adapted into a movie, which was released on August 9th of this year and was met with praise, mostly due to Guillermo del Toro producing the terrifying film. Coming in at 4, literally Everything by Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe had a knack for creating some of the most horrifying tales and infusing them with visceral dread. Poe is best known for his poetry and short stories, particularly his tales of mystery and the macabre, and is generally considered the inventor of the detective fiction genre and greatly contributed to the genre of science fiction. He was also the first well-known writer to earn a living through writing alone, resulting in a financially difficult life and career before his death on October 3rd, 1849, when he was found delirious and wandering the streets of Baltimore. However, during his years as a writer, his characters and narrators mostly focused on the mentally fragile and the insane, people who are haunted by things that might be literal or even manifestations of their unsound thought processes. Some of his most terrifying works in particular are stories like The Telltale Heart or The Cask of Amontillado, which both retain their powers to petrify readers more than a century after publication. Poe was a writer who managed to tap into the fundamental fear we all have, that the people around us may not be as they seem. Coming at 3, we need to talk about Kevin by Lionel Shriver. Published in 2003, this book is perhaps one of the most haunting books I have ever read and has continued to linger with me for years, which is exactly why it has a place on our list. We need to talk about Kevin follows a fictional school massacre, a subject matter that has been incredibly prevalent in our society over the last few years, which is absolutely disgusting, through the eyes of the shooter's mother, Eva, and documents her attempt to come to terms with her son Kevin and the murders he committed. Now, what makes this book truly terrifying is that it focuses on the terror of children, the few of us that have maintained their innocence. However, the terror only increases when we come to terms with the fact that the human beings we create become their own people, and sometimes those people become strangers that may go on to commit unlawful acts. Obviously, the idea that our children may grow up one day to be criminals is absolutely terrifying, but what if there's a chance that their psychopathic ways may have been influenced by their development, and that in turn, specifically in the book, Eva's ambivalence towards maternity may have just been the trigger that causes Kevin to become the monster we read about. In 2005, BBC Films acquired the rights to adapt the book as a film, which was helmed by director Lynn Ramsey. In 2011, it was released and starred Tilda Swinton and Ezra Miller, and was, as expected, met with praise from film critics and cinemagoers. Coming in at 2, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abram Mellon the Mage. This book is a 3-part 15th century book of mystic arts written by Abraham for his son Lamesh. It is unknown when it was first written, but it was translated to English in the year 1900 and quickly developed a reputation for being cursed, of course. Now, Now, the story itself follows an Egyptian mage named Abraham, who taught a system of magic to Abraham of Worms, a Jew in Worms, Germany, presumed to have lived from 1362 to 1458. The story involves Abraham passing his magical and Kabbalistic secrets on his son and tells how he acquired his knowledge. Abraham believed that every person had their own unique personal demons, and through the book we learn rituals that could bring our personal demons under control, and even supernatural feats using sigils and magic words on a grid. Now, the book's downside, like I previously stated, is that it's believed anyone who possesses a copy will be haunted by spirits from another realm, and in turn will experience terrible luck that will ultimately bring about their demise. Finally, coming in at number 1, The Orphan Story. Written sometime between 1608 and 1615 by Martin de Leon Cardenas, a monk who broke his sacred vow, The Orphan Story is a novel about a 14-year-old Spaniard who leaves Granada and heads to the Americas to seek his fortune. The boy ricochets around the Spanish Empire, from the high society fiestas of Lima to the mephitic mines of Potosi, and even goes on to witness Sir Francis Drake's attack on Puerto Rico. So why exactly is this book on our list? It doesn't sound that horrifying. Well, this book wasn't actually published until 2018, and that's because every time publishers tried to release it, the people involved kept dying under mysterious circumstances. A Peruvian academic named Belinda Palacios rediscovered the manuscript hidden in the archives of Hispanic Society of America in 1965. However, when she began working on the book, colleagues quickly warned her of the curse that was said to linger within the pages, and in turn she was deterred by the unusual deaths that surrounded the manuscript. Most of the deaths were caused by car accidents and sudden unexplainable illnesses, which of course informed the rumor that the book was cursed, and why it took 400 years for a brave soul to see the project through to completion. In at number 5 we have Tamino's Hell. Okay, so this one is a poem rather than a full book, but it still holds an ancient curse that it is worth sending a warning about. It was written by Japanese writer Seijo Yaso. Not much is known about the writer. He published the poem in 1919 in his 27th collection of poetry. Seijo lost his sister and his father during World War I. It is said since that happened, he was in a constant state of suffering and grief. Since the poem gained its reputation for the curse, many have given their opinion how the book became such a danger. Many believe that Seijo was vulnerable to demons while he was in his suffering state, that he might have been persuaded to do their bidding to ease his pain. He allowed them to curse the poem in such a way that when it was read out loud, it would cause those who heard it to suffer. It is unknown if Seijo was aware of the consequences of his actions when he published the work. The work itself seems to almost confirm this, as it follows a young boy who has suffered loss and his descent into hell. When the poem was released, there quickly came reports of sudden passings. One woman is said to have died moments after reading the poem out loud. Others have complained of chest pains, sharp pains in their brain, along with many other severe symptoms. Many people got sick and others passed away suddenly from illness or bizarre accidents. The one passing that was most famous was that of Japanese filmmaker Terayama Shuji. Shuji made a film based on the poem in 1974. The film was believed to have been cursed by the poem when Shuji passed away suddenly shortly after it was released. The book has since become a terrifying legend, and those who know of it try to avoid it at all costs. In 2004, the writer Inu Haiko published a book based on the poem. This brought the poem to a new audience. Since then, more people have found the poem online to test if the rumors are true. Those people reported weird occurrences and horrific accidents after they read it. In at number 4, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage is a book of mystic arts written by Abraham for his son Lamech. It was a 3-part 15th century book. It was translated in the 1900s. Once translated, it developed a reputation for being cursed. Abraham wrote his book based on the idea that every person has their own unique personal demon. The book contains rituals to help the reader summon and control their demon. It is told that once you could do this, you could perform supernatural feats. It is said that if you own this book, you will also get the attached curse. Anyone with a copy in their possession will be haunted by spirits from another realm. People unlucky enough to own the book have had bad luck follow them, and some even met an early demise. It is said that the incantations that give you the ability to control your demon releases the curse and opens you up to demons from the other side. Fun stuff. In at number 3, we have the Great Omar. Some call the Great Omar the most cursed book of all time. Unlike other books in this list that might unleash a curse on the person or people who open it, the curse is often contained. This book, however, has been linked to many great tragedies throughout history. People were captured by the beauty of this book. The beauty of the binding hid the curse from the world and enchanted buyers. The book was embellished with over 1,000 jewels, with 5,000 leathers on lays and 100 square feet of gold leaf. It took the team of craftsmen over 2.5 years to make. Only one was ever made due to the grandeur of the book. When the book was finally completed, it was sold at auction for £1,000 and shipped to New York for display. The book went down on the Titanic and was destroyed. Some say it was due to the book being on board that the ship went down when further misfortunes followed anyone involved. The creator of the book drowned while trying to rescue a woman a few weeks later. His partner decided to recreate the book. Again, this was a long and painful task, costing him a lot of time. Once the second book was created, it was placed in a vault in London. He wanted it to be reserved so that it would not meet the same fate as the first. Unfortunately, the vault and the second creator were both destroyed in the bombings of World War II. Was this a coincidence that both books and creators were destroyed? Some think that an ancient curse latched onto the book on creation. This then passed to the second on creation. Was it due to the story inside? Little is written on the book. People only ever paid attention to the cover. This may have been by design. The company that created the books then passed on to one of the previous owner's nephews. After his retirement, he decided to do a personal project and recreate the book. This copy lives in the British Library to this day. I would not risk attempting to touch or read it though. His past seems like a clear warning. In at number 2, we have the Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is also nicknamed the Gospel of Satan. It is an occult book written by a man in the 15th century. Little is known about the man who wrote the book, but he is believed to have been possessed by the devil. On completion of the book, the devil passed from him into the book. The book is known to be cursed by the devil. You're advised to not attempt to read this book. A grimoire is a book of spells. The particular spells in the book are dark and twisted. Often some form of sacrifice is needed to complete any of the spells. You would need to be willing to perform some truly evil acts if you wanted to be successful with these spells. A lot of people look for this book due to its promise to be able to bring loved ones back to life or summon demons. Many people who are grieving loved ones who passed too soon try to use this book to bring them back. This is extremely dangerous, and not only will it may not work, but it might backfire and cause your own demise. This book has such a dark reputation, it has been the most feared book since medieval times. Of course, it goes without saying that you should avoid this book, really any book that promises it can summon demons, as that is usually a big sign that it might be cursed. Catcher in the Rye? What the f***? Everyone's read this book. I'm not possessed. Maybe. And finally, in at number 1, we have The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye is one of the most well-known American books of the 20th century. It is often a required reading for most teens during high school. Despite this, the book has a dark past that often gets overlooked. It was written by J.D. Salinger and first published in 1951. The book is considered to perfectly capture the essence of adolescence. Throughout time and the changes in society is still relatable to teenagers' lives today. It reflects the true nature of being an adolescent, the rebellion, survival, and internal struggles of growing up. Follows the story of a young man named Holden Caulfield. He has been kicked out of a number of schools, and when the story picks up, he has been kicked out of his latest school. He doesn't want to tell his parents, fearing the punishment that might follow. He runs away from home and starts his adventures in New York. At the time of its release, it was seen as controversial for using bad language and adult themes, but the author didn't want to censor the book. He wanted an accurate depiction. None of this is why the book is considered cursed, though. The curse comes from the link the book has to murders. The list of crimes linked to the book is longer than you might expect, one of the most famous being the assassination of John Lennon. His killer sat and read the book until the police arrived. He then used the book to write and sign his confession. He later explained that after reading the book he wanted to save Lennon and maintain his innocence forever. This is not the only famous murder connected to the book. Robert Bardo took the life of actress Rebecca Schaeffer, and John Hinckley assassinated Ronald Reagan. Both were carrying copies of the book while committing their crimes. It is unknown why this curse turns people into killers or how this book became cursed. It appears that it has the power to turn certain readers into criminals. It seems that it does not have the ability to make everyone behave in the same way. Maybe if you read the book at a low point in your life, you'll be susceptible to the curse. So there is a chance you'll read the book and be fine, but there is a risk that it will intercept your mind with the dark thoughts. It seems to make the reader believe they need to cleanse the world. So if you do have to read this, please just be careful.
Number 5 on this list is the Sworn Book of Honorius. This is an ancient medieval grimoire grimoire that was very influential and was apparently written by Honorius of Thebes. I say that word apparently because it's currently unknown whether Honorius of Thebes was actually a real person or a complete myth. If he was real, then he's said to have a deep connection with religion, magic, and the devil. This book, the Sworn Book of Honorius, is said to be the oldest medieval grimoire to date, with some people estimating that it was written back in the 1300s. Even though Honorius of Thebes was said to have written this book, it's said to be a collection of many magicians who attempted to condense the knowledge that they had into 93 chapters. The book covers a wide array of magical topics. This includes having the ability to travel to purgatory, or to potentially save someone from purgatory, or even send them there in the first place. It shows people the rituals necessary to summon a demon and bring them into our real physical world. Then once that demon is there, the book goes on to describe how we can command a demon to do our bidding. It shows people how to send someone to hell or to heaven if that person chooses. It even goes in depth about treasure hunting and the proper methods to finding treasure. This book was supposed to act as a one-stop shop on how to be a full magician. A big warning though, and why you need to pray before reading, is actually written in the book. Let him who would work in a magical art beware that he not be in deadly sin, for if he be, he shall be mad ever after. For the soul by its nature desires to see God in whom it delights, but the impediment of sin frustrates its desire and it cannot see God. He who would work in magical art must be willing in his work and utterly cleansed from all filthiness, for the more he suffers, the more he shall obtain. Basically, if you intend to use this book, then you can expect your soul to go through some serious suffering. Number 4 on this list is the Dragon Rouge. The Dragon Rouge is an updated version of one of the most haunted texts in history, the Grand Grimoire. Keegan actually covered the Grand Grimoire in one of his previous parts of this series, so I highly recommend you go check out one of those videos if you haven't already. But the Cole's notes are that the Grand Grimoire was a text that described how to make a deal with the devil. It showed the reader how to summon Lucifer, and then how to make a pact with him once he is summoned. The Dragon Rouge is a version of this Grand Grimoire that goes further into detail on several demons and how one should summon them. What's interesting about this text is that it inspired the name for a cult group in the 90s called the Dragon Rouge. This cult was founded by Thomas Carlson, a Swedish man, in 1989. Thomas claimed that he had visions growing up as a child and believed to be connected to spirits and God somehow. This cult is based in the left-hand path of magic, which for those who don't know, is considered to be the dark magic and associated with the workings of the devil. Apparently, the Dragon Rouge text is one that is worshipped and used quite often during the proceedings of this cult. If you wanted to, you could actually visit the Dragon Rouge's website and volunteer to join their cult, but based on the writings of the book that they worship, I personally wouldn't recommend it. Number 3 on this list is the Book of Shadows. The name alone, the Book of Shadows, is enough to make someone believe that this text is haunted, but its origins confirm that suspicion even more. Gerald Gardner was a Wiccan living in the 1940s. Now, if you aren't familiar with what a Wiccan is, then it's actually someone who practices the religion of Wicca, which is a modern pagan religion. Gerald Gardner created the Book of Shadows, or was at least the person who brought it to people's attention. He's also known as the father of Wicca, and is considered by most to be the one who started this religion. He may not have actually been the one to have written the book though, because he says that he received this ancient text from a secret coven of witches. Owen Davies, an expert on haunted books, says that this book was one of the last of a line of worshippers of an ancient fertility religion, which he and his followers believed had survived centuries of persecution by Christian authorities. This obviously made this text extremely valuable to Gerald, and he used it as a means to gain more of a following for his religion. Inside this book are magical rituals, spells, enchantments, and a variety of instructions for how to perform other sacred summonings. This book is said to be extremely dark in nature, and certainly something that you would want to pray before reading. Gerald apparently used many of these spells and rituals through his life as he praised witchcraft. Others who have read this book have reported feeling extremely cold and getting the sensation of being watched. Any book that you apparently receive from a coven of witches has spells on how to worship them, and it's called the Book of Shadows. It certainly can't be any good. Number 2 on this list is the Great Omar. The Great Omar is one of the prettiest and ornate books that you will ever see in your life. Back in the day, book binding, the process of assembling a book and putting it together, was considered by most to be an art form. This book really proves that, having taken 2,500 hours to create and using emeralds, rubies, and sapphires in its creation, it really was a marvel. The text in this book contained a bunch of 4-line poems by Omar Khayyam. These poems were apparently filled with temptation and condemned by the church because of that. That being said though, After the book was constructed, Sangorsky, the man who designed the book, wanted to sell it at an exorbitant price. Problem was, not many people wanted a book that would cost them thousands of pounds. This book traveled by ship back and forth from Europe and America several times with no apparent buyer in sight. This continued until it's made its way onto a very famous ship called the Titanic. Obviously, the Titanic did not reach its destination, and the Great Omar sank to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, where it rests to this day. However, what gives this book the designation of being haunted is that only a week or two later, Sangorsky himself died. He died from drowning, just like the people on the Titanic would have died. Ever since this has happened, people believe that the Great Omar was actually cursed, and that it could have potentially been the cause of the Titanic's demise and the death of Sangorsky. It could all be one big coincidence, but I don't recommend reading The Great Omar 2, which was published by Sangorsky's partner later in life, because some evil may just befall you. Number 1 on this list is The Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a book that came after one of the oldest grimoires to ever exist, which is the Key of Solomon. Now, the Key of Solomon was estimated to have been written in the 15th century, whereas the book that we're looking at right now, The Lesser Key of Solomon, was said to have been written 2 centuries later. The first book talks a lot about the power of God and utilizing that power for personal gain. Typically, this was done through extensive worship of God and various ceremonies that praised his power. The Lesser Key of Solomon, though, takes a far different approach. This book expanded on those principles, but mainly dove into demonology. Its pages studied the hierarchy of demons and the beliefs surrounding demons. As many of you are probably expecting, though, it didn't just stop there at an intellectual study. The Lesser Key of Solomon went far deeper and described the process in summoning demons and traveling to the demon world. Its pages show a much greater appreciation to Satan and discuss the great power that can be obtained from worshipping demons and the devil. It goes into detail on how to craft potions that you can give to other people that will then put them under your spell. This book is also said to be heavily cursed. It is reported that if you own this book, you are susceptible to demonic possession. Previous owners have reported strange ongoings, such as pages turning on their own, other books flying off of the shelf, and dark creatures appearing in their home. Therefore, owning this book is said to be extremely risky, and even though you might get a glimpse into how to navigate the underworld, you could become a victim to one of those very demons that you're trying to summon.
Coming in at number 5, we have Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas is also known as the Devil's Bible. It was written in the 16th century by a monk. It has been told that the monk had broken his vow. He was then put on trial for breaking his vow. This is not something that was taken lightly. After a short trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to execution. He had a couple of days left. With the little time that he had left, he wanted to write everything he knew about the human experience. He wanted there to be something left of him after he passed on. He was writing as much as he could for as long as he could. He knew they would come to take him soon. With the little time that he had left, he decided that he would summon the devil. He wanted to make a deal with the devil. He promised him his soul if Lucifer would finish writing the book that he had started. Once he was taken away, the devil did just that. The book was completed by the devil himself. It is said to be overflowing in dark imagery. The book contains rituals that you can perform to contact the devil yourself. It also includes sketches of the devil and other demonic beings. The devil used the book to hold dark, ancient curses. As an evil being, he wanted anyone who came into contact with the book in their life to be cursed. He wanted to take more souls as he did the old monk. It is said the soul of the monk is bound to the book by the devil, as those who touch it may see or hear the monk's warning to save their souls. Coming in at number 4, we have the Book of Soiga. The Book of Soiga is also known as the Book of Death. There have only ever been 2 copies known in existence. The book has been written in an unknown language. There has never been anyone who have been able to identify the language. It is also not known who's written the book. There was a lot of mystery around the text. A scholar named John Dee found the book. He wanted to attempt to decode the book. He became obsessed with the book. He started to fall into insanity. John started to no longer resemble himself. His professional work was not the same, and he was consumed by the obsession of the writing. After his death in 1608, the book was lost. It was not discovered again until 1994. Since the book was resurfaced, many have tried to decode the book. Anyone attempting to decode the book have had to deal with some serious consequences. According According to the legend, anyone who does successfully decode the book will pass away within the next 3 years. It's rumored this may have been what happened to John Dee. Decoding the book might have driven him crazy and the curse took his life. He might have hidden the book so that for all those years it would not hurt anyone else or drive anyone insane. Both copies have now been found. They have been secured and can be found in London. One is kept at the British Library and the other is at the Bodleian Library. They are locked away safe so that no one can attempt to read the horrors contained within the text. Coming in at number 3, we have the Book of Abramelin. The book was formed from 12 manuscripts written by a man named Abraham. He wrote the book to pass on his secrets to his son. He told the story of his journey across the Egyptian desert. During his time in the desert, he came across a magical being. The mage taught a powerful form of Kabbalistic magic to Abraham. In return, the mage asked for Abraham to live in fear of the Lord and to serve him. He said he must not live his life in search of riches or have more than he needs. He warned him not to use the magic to obtain any of these things. When Abraham returned home, he wrote the book to ensure he did not lose the knowledge. He wrote powerful incantations, ways to summon otherworldly beings as well as other powerful spells. His pride started to get the best of him once the book was complete. He decided to only keep this to himself and pass it down to his family. He began to boast of his newfound power. He bragged that he could raise the dead and become invisible at will. Of course, no one in the town believed him. He decided he would show them all. He used minor spells to prove his power. Once they believed him, others came to see him. They offered him great jewels to bring back their loved ones or bring them good fortune. He fell deeper and deeper into his greed. He had broken his oath to the mage. He began to have bad luck and strange things happening around him. He would see spirits from another world and was being haunted by dark entities. It is believed that as he broke his oath, he became cursed. He suddenly passed away in a horrible accident. Since then, anyone who owned the book was haunted and plagued by the curse. Abraham's family never used the book and tried to keep away from the rest of the world. Coming in at number 2, we have The King in Yellow. The King in Yellow is a book of short stories. It was written by writer Robert W. Chambers and first published in 1895. The book was named after a play which has the same name and recurs as a motive throughout some of the stories. The first half of the book contains highly esteemed horror stories. It has been described as a classic in the field of supernatural. There are 10 stories included in the book. The first 4 mention The King in Yellow. The King in Yellow is said to be a forbidden play that drives those who read it into despair and madness. Although these short stories only speak of the forbidden play, it is said that if you were to find the original text, you may be driven mad. It was once performed for a mass audience. The cursed play lured the audience or reader in. By the time you get to the second act, the audience or reader have been driven completely insane. This is why the text is thought to have been destroyed and is forbidden to read. If you do think you have found it, then I warn you to not read it, or you might just be driven mad yourself. I'm already mad, so I can read it. And finally, in at number 1, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther. The Sorrows of Young Werther is a novel written by John Wolfgang von Goethe and published in 1774. Goethe was 24 at the time of writing the book, and it took him only 5.5 weeks of intense writing to finish. It instantly placed him among the foremost international literary celebrities and was among the best known of his work. The majority of the plot focuses on a young man's extreme response to unrequited love. The book had a big cultural impact. It was given the name Werther Fever. Young men throughout Europe began to dress in clothing described in the novel. The obsession started to go a little further than this. Young men started to copy the ending of the book where the main character takes his own life. Copies of the book were found with each copycat passing. Authorities all over Europe were concerned and didn't know what to do. They banned the wearing of the clothing from the book, hoping this would stop the copycats from taking inspiration from the text. It was labeled an epidemic, and governments were desperate to stop the young men from passing. This led to a revision of the book in 1787. They gave the book a new ending, a happy ending in hopes of stopping any further pain. In the new ending, a friend learns of his plans to hurt himself and stops him. The young man then learns how to become a part of society and goes on to live his life. The original copy of the book was banned. It is said if you read it, even today, you'll be cursed and driven mad to the point of copying the steps of the young Werther. The new version of the book stopped the epidemic, and more books were given a happy ending to not cause such a disaster again.
Number 5 on this list is the Picatrix. The Picatrix is a large grimoire compiled of all Arabic magic. The content associated with this book is so abhorrently graphic, though, that it's often avoided by people who study such books. The book lives in the world of astrology and tells its reader that their magical abilities will be powered by the stars. In the book, you can be able to hone the power of planets like Saturn and Jupiter and use that power to your liking. Typically, Typically, the spells in this book, though, are of an evil nature. The spell that follows is about creating a wasteland for you to live in. On the day and hour of Saturn, with the second face of Capricorn ascending with Saturn standing in it, place the thin sheet in the place that you desire to be depopulated. The harmful power of Saturn will flow into it and it will never be populated for as long as the thin sheet shall stand there. The spell there doesn't even explain that you need to coat this thin sheet that you're using with fluid from a pig's brain for it to work. However, it's grotesque spells like this that have many experts avoiding this book at all costs. The book is filled with rituals and spells that are just plain wrong, and honestly, I don't know if even praying beforehand is enough to read this book. I just avoid it at all costs. Number 4 on this list is Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 is a book that was written by Ray Bradbury that was published in 1953. The book is all about a dystopian United States where books are completely outlawed, and if anyone is to read a book, then these people called firemen will attack your home and burn it to the ground, all of your belongings as well. The book has actually received some pretty exceptional reviews and is a pretty unique take on a dystopian world. Unlike some of the other entries on this list and in our past parts, there's nothing inherently evil about the words in this book. It won't teach you how to praise the devil, and reading it won't curse you or make you susceptible to demonic possession. However, reading one version of the book that was published might do far worse. Reading that version might kill you. Asbestos is a mineral that can be turned into a chemical used to make something fireproof. Well, back in 1953 when this book was published, the company that published it thought that a really cool gimmick would be to coat the entire book in asbestos when they were binding it. The idea being that these fictional firemen would have no way of burning it even if they wanted to. Although this was a really interesting promotional effort and the sales of the book did pretty well, nobody was aware at that time of the serious effect that extended exposure to asbestos can have on somebody. Asbestosis is a chronic lung disease caused by inhaling asbestos fibers. This causes shortness of breath and a much higher possibility that you get lung cancer. A lot of miners, railroad workers, electricians, they can be susceptible to this disease, or in this case, people who purchased the first publication of Fahrenheit 451. Now, the negative effects of this chemical won't show up for potentially a decade, and it does take some serious extended exposure. However, some people have claimed that the purchasing of this book caused them long-term effects later in life. If you bought this thing and then put it on your bookshelf to sit for years, then you could be inhaling this chemical for years without even realizing it. I suppose this book wouldn't fall under the conventional definition of being haunted, but I certainly wouldn't want to be reading it if I was you. Number 3 on this list is the Prophecies by Nostradamus. We've talked a decent amount about Nostradamus on this channel before. If you missed those videos and you don't know who he is, then Nostradamus was a French astrologer and seer. He lived from 1503 to 1566, and we still talk about him today because of his work called the Prophecies. The Prophecies is a collection of poetic quatrains which are short poems of only 4 lines. He made 942 of them and called the book the Prophecies because that's exactly what these poems are, prophecies. Through these prophecies, Nostradamus is credited with having predicted the use of nuclear weapons, the rises of Napoleon and Adolf Hitler, the death of Princess Diana, the attacks on the World Trade Center, and that's just to name a few. The reason that I'm including this in this video about having to pray before we use it is because we've got to hope that Nostradamus was wrong. A lot of the predictions that he's made for the coming years, they're extremely detrimental to human life and the planet as we know it. For instance, in 2022, a few of the grim predictions Nostradamus has is that Paris will become under siege, Japan will get hit with a record-breaking earthquake leaving thousands dead, and the entire planet will enter a war based off of climate change. That's only a small selection of the predictions this guy has going on for the coming year, and they don't sound too appealing to me. If you ever were to read the prophecies in its entirety, then just pray that this book isn't haunted with the truth. Number 2 on this list is The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye is one of the most famous novels written in the last decade. However, some of its fame comes from a very dark and evil place. The Catcher in the Rye has been linked to many murders over the years. It is said to be the favorite of a large group of criminals who believe that the book is speaking to them. Many people think that this has to do with the main character, Holden Caulfield, who feels like an outcast and doesn't fit in anywhere. One can imagine that this may be the same sort of feelings that a criminal would feel when they go through their adolescence, which is what Holden is going through in the book. Hundreds of crimes have been linked to this story, but the most infamous is the murder of John Lennon. Mark David Chapman, a lover of The Catcher in the Rye and a deep admirer of John Lennon, assassinated the musician on December 8th, 1980. It said that he believed he was saving Lennon's soul from the evil in the world and was preserving his innocence to live on. This could be a whole bunch of baloney though, because he's also said that he was jealous of the Beatle and wanted glory for himself. Whatever his true motives were, right after he fatally shot John Lennon, he pulled out a copy of The Catcher in the Rye and read it until the police showed up and apprehended him. Reading this book may not inherently make you an evil individual, but hundreds of crimes like this have been linked to this book, and it does certainly seem to pull at the nasty feelings that live inside of us. If you are going to read it, you may just want to say a prayer before doing so. Number 1 on this list is the Satanic Bible. The Satanic Bible was written by Anton LaVey in 1969, and it has been described as one of the most influential pieces of writing to impact modern-day Satanism. The book is exactly as the title would suggest. It's a collection of essays, stories, and rituals with the main purpose of praising and worshiping Satan. Satanists regard this text as being an authoritative text, and for many of them, it's reached scriptural status. Many cults have been based around this text, dark rituals have been associated to it, and it's been known to incite chaos. In fact, because of the devilish instances that have been associated with it, there have been many times where libraries, schools, and even prisons have banned the book from being there. This book is fully evil in nature and goes into deep detail about how to truly become one with the devil. It may not be haunted by one specific ghostly presence, but one could make the argument that it is haunted by Satan himself. The content is so demonic in nature and it has become such a successful read that it can be linked to hundreds of deaths over the years. These include ritualistic sacrifices, murders, and suicides. If you ever were to read this book, then I would recommend praying beforehand to avoid falling into a deep and somber rabbit hole. I'm sure that reading the book would be an interesting intellectual study, but surrounding yourself with that much darkness, it isn't healthy for the human mind. Number 5 on this list is Shams al-Marif. This book, from my findings, is not inherently evil in its teachings, but is one of those examples of potentially being a bit too much power for one person to possess. It's a 13th century Arabic grimoire written by Ahmed al-Buni. The book attempts to teach its readers how to perform ancient Arabic magic and is very spiritualistic. This book was super influential in Arabic culture and gained a large following. Many good things have come from this book, but also when you have a large amount of people following anything, some take it too far. Wikipedia writes, in contemporary form, the book consists of 2 volumes, Shams al-Marif al-Kubra and Shams al-Marif al-Sugra, the former being the larger of the 2. The first few chapters introduce the reader to magic squares and the combination of numbers and the alphabet that are believed to bring magical effect, which the author insists is the only way to communicate with jinn, angels, and spirits. And that right there is one of the main teachings in this book, the ability to talk to spirits. The amount of scary stories that we've talked about on this channel though, in regards to people trying to communicate with the dead is crazy, and it shows just how often things like this can go wrong. This has obviously happened many a time with this book, and those trying to reach their departed loved one end up contacting a super dangerous demon. I don't think that there's anything morally wrong with contacting the dead, if the dead are okay with it, of course, but it seems like doing this always ends up with something bad happening. This grimoire won't curse you just by simply reading it, but if you try and perform some of the rituals it suggests, then it's very likely that you could cause some serious harm to you or those that you love. I recommend just avoiding this book altogether. Number 4 on this list is Devarmi Mystery. Now the book in question here is actually a fictional book, and therefore it would be actually impossible for you to read it anyways, even if you wanted to for some reason. But that being said, it doesn't change the fact that it's definitely cursed and extremely evil. If this book was real, then we would need to get rid of it as soon as possible because it teaches humans how to do some very dangerous things. The book is part of the Lovecraftian universe and made its first appearance in The Secret of the Tomb. The book isn't referenced too much in that story, but it's described in pretty good detail in the story The Black Bargain. In that book, it describes Devarmi Mystery as something that told you how you could compound aconite and belladonna and draw circles of phosphorescent fire on the floor when the stars were right. Something that spoke of melting tallow candles and blending them with corpse fat, whispered of the uses to which animal sacrifices might be put. It spoke of meetings that could be arranged with various parties, most most people don't even believe in, with cold, deliberate directions for traffic with ancient evil. Drawing circles of fire, sacrificing animals, talking with ancient evil, this all sounds like pretty bad news to me. Especially the part that says you can arrange meetings with various parties. It's clear that not only can this book teach someone how to perform any number of spells and incantations, but some of those spells will deal with the summoning of ancient demons and creatures. And if we assume that this book is real and can be read, then that would also mean that the terrifyingly powerful gods Lovecraft wrote about would also be real. Meaning that this book could grant you the ability to summon Cthulhu or something even worse. Summoning your standard demon is already bad enough, but an all-knowing, super powerful god definitely raises the stakes a little bit. This book, from every description I can read about, sounds like something that's just far too dangerous for any human to use and wield safely. If it ever was real and you did happen to stumble upon it, best to avoid reading it at all costs. Number 3 on this list is the Book of Abramelin. Abraham was an Egyptian mage who lived between 1362 and 1458 and dedicated his life to magic. Once Abraham visited Egypt, and there he met a magician, not that magician which you see on TV shows, but that who really knows dark magic and dark secrets. He told Abraham many dark and mysterious secrets and strange things which you and I can never imagine. He told him how to live the dead person, the location of under-earth treasures, how to contact devils. Besides this, he also told him the secrets of becoming invisible and flying in the sky. That last passage that I just read was written by Sharik Kamal while he was listing the most cursed books of all time. This book is known to be dangerous, and it isn't just because of the contents in it either. Yes, summoning the dead and performing dark magic in its own right is very dangerous and has the potential to cause serious problems for you and those around you. This book, though, may just be inherently cursed to begin with. Many people who have read this book, even those who don't go on to perform any of the rituals or incantations that the book describes, have gotten horribly bad luck afterwards. Like the second they opened up the book and started reading, their entire life just flipped on its side. Some have said that afterwards their home became haunted by some dark spirit and they had to move. It's almost as if the book itself is a portal to another demonic dimension, and just the action of opening it could cause something to leak out. I'm sure that Abraham was a great writer, but no book is worth dying over, so I won't be reading this one anytime soon. Number 2 on this list is The Great Omar. This book is believed to be the cause of one of the most tragic disasters in all of human history, sinking the unsinkable ship, the Titanic. No, you don't catch Leonardo DiCaprio reading this book in the 1997 movie version, but maybe he should have. This book, even though it is deeply cursed, is potentially the most ornate and beautiful books to have ever been created. In fact, it took over 2,500 hours to create this book, which translates to over 100 full days. One would think that a book of this kind would fetch quite the pretty penny, but that actually wasn't the case. In fact, the man who binded this book, Francis Sangorski, had an extremely hard time trying to sell it to anyone. Finally, he did find a home for it in America and was in the process of sending it over there, but it never reached its destination though, because it was on the Titanic. Now, the reason that people think this book had something to do with the unsinkable ship sinking is because only a week or so after the ship had gone down, so did Sangorski. He died by drowning to death a very short time after the book had also sunk to the bottom of the ocean. This is why people believe that something about this book will curse those around it and potentially lead to someone drowning. I personally think it's a bit of a stretch to just assume that having this book caused the entire Titanic to sink. However, it is a remarkable coincidence what happened to Sangorski. It probably won't ever happen, but if this book ever did wash ashore one day, I wouldn't want to be the one to pick it up first. Number 1 on this list is the Book of Soiga. The Book of Soiga is one of the most complete collections of magic and dark magic that one could come across. Wikipedia writes, amongst the incantations and instructions on magic, astrology, demonology, lists of conjunctions, lunar mansions, and names of genealogies of angels, the book contains 36 large squares of letters which Dee was unable to decipher. Otherwise unknown medieval magical treaties are cited, including works known as the Liber E, Liber Os, Liber Dignus, Liber Sipil, and Liber Munob. So we'll get to those letters in a second because those play into the cursed nature of this book, but even without those, we're still dealing with a book that goes into depth on some pretty dangerous topics. The one that jumps off the page to me as being potentially problematic is demonology, the study of demons and the hierarchy to them, and also the study of how to potentially summon them. This is certainly problematic and already a reason to not read this book, but let's get back to those letters. In 1608, there lived a man named John Dee. John Dee was fascinated with this book and wanted to figure out how to decode the letters. He reached out to the angel Uriel, and Uriel told him that only the worthy one will be able to crack the code. Truly a chosen one scenario where the book will reveal its secrets to the one that it decides. John Dee tried to decode it anyways, but then a grim fate befell him and he died. Then, very mysteriously, the book disappeared from the face of the earth for almost 400 years, until it all of a sudden reappeared in 1994. Now, it's thought that trying to decode these letters could prove fatal if you aren't the one worthy to do so. There's over 7 billion people on the planet, so the odds that you're the one worthy one and won't die are pretty slim. Not the sort of odds that I'd want to take just to look at some strange medieval letters. Number 5 on this list is the Treatise of the Vessels. The year is 1981. Harrison Ford has already taken the big screen a few times, but is he a leading actor? Yes, Raiders of the Lost Ark takes to the screen, and the beautiful George Lucas and Steven Spielberg brainchild officially solidifies Harrison Ford as being an elite A-lister in Hollywood. Well, this beautiful brainchild of theirs didn't just come out of thin air, but it was very likely inspired by the Treatise of the Vessels. This text is said to talk about some priceless treasures from King Solomon along with the Ark of the Covenant. If found, these would be some of the most valuable things ever rediscovered in all of human history. When there's gold, people are going to come, and the same thing applies here. There are riches galore to be found if someone is able to get to the bottom of this mystery, and the secrets may be within the Treatise of the Vessels. The thing is, it doesn't tell you the exact location of the Ark, so our daring explorers will need to find out for themselves. In case you didn't know, the Ark of the Covenant is said to hold tablets containing the 10 Commandments. The rest of the treasure is described in the treatise as being 77 tables of gold, and their gold was from the walls of the Garden of Eden that was revealed to Solomon, and they radiated like the radiance of the sun and moon, which radiate at the height of the world. So yeah, it's all pretty freaking good stuff. Although, I don't know if y'all remember the end of Harrison Ford's massive breakout movie, but discovering the Ark of the Covenant may not be the best thing ever. In fact, it's said that touching the Ark of the Covenant will result in death by the hands of God. That's why some people think this whole thing is cursed. Yes, if you actually found this thing, then you might be the most wealthy person in the world, but it may also kill you in the process. You also may never find it at all and dedicate your life to nothing. I'd say that you can probably read this thing, just leave the exploring to our main man Indy. Number 4 on this list is the Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is definitely an interesting one, largely because no one has any idea what it's saying. This is a 250-page book where pretty much all of the words are in an unfamiliar language that we can't seem to decipher. The reason that people think this thing is inherently cursed isn't just because of the gibberish though, it's because of the pictures that go along with said gibberish. Cosmological symbols, weird plants doing weird things, and nude women doing some other weird things are all over this book. It should also be stated that the manner of the drawings are just plain creepy. Like, there's nothing inherently evil or cursed about a plant or a naked woman, but the way that the book has drawn them out really does give me some serious devil vibes. Because of this, people worry that the book may be cursed. That potentially this is a book from the underworld which somehow made its way to our world. This is why we can't understand the words, but a demon would be able to pick it up no problem. Experts have researched the language, and although they don't know what it is, have discovered some hallmarks that indicate it is a real language of some kind. Therefore, it could be some kind of demonic tongue that we aren't familiar with. Granted, it could also be some other ancient language that's just been lost in time. Demonic language or ancient language, I think based on the drawings, it's clear that whatever is said is probably not PG stuff. Who knows how many gruesome or questionable things this book has been part of in its lifetime. Considering you wouldn't be able to read it anyways, I'd just avoid it altogether. Number 3 on this list is the Handbook of Ritual Power. Anything called the Handbook of Ritual Power probably deserves to be on the list. Owen Jarvis details this book nicely by writing, "This 20-page codex dates back around 1,300 years and is written in Coptic. It contains a variety of magical spells and formulas including love spells, spells for curing black jaundice, and instructions on how to perform an exorcism. The text may have been written by a group of Sethians, an ancient Christian sect who held Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, in high regard." The opening of the text references a mysterious figure named Bactiotha, whose identity is unknown. "I give thanks to you, and I call upon you, the Bactiotha, the great one who is very untrustworthy, the one who is lord over the 40 and the 9 kinds of serpents," a translation of the text reads. The researchers who translated and analyzed the text call it a Handbook of Ritual Power. It is now housed at the Museum of Ancient Cultures at Macquarie University in Sydney. The university purchased the codex in 1981 from a Vienna-based antiquities dealer named Michael Fackelman. Where Fackelman got it from is unknown. Spells, formulas, black jaundice, all of this sounds quite a lot like some of the other books that we've looked at in the first 2 parts of this series. A book that probably teaches humans some skills that we simply aren't ready to receive. A book that, if it fell into the wrong hands, somebody with evil intentions, could prove to be really, really bad. There are things that need to be left in the hands of higher beings, and making somebody fall in love with someone else may just be one of them. Keep this book locked up and away from prying eyes. Number 2 on this list is the Dresden Codex. Owen Jarvis details once again the Dresden Codex beautifully by writing, "The Dresden Codex is a Mayan text dating back around 800 years. It contains 39 beautifully illustrated sheets with texts and images on both sides. Research published in 2016 in the Journal of Astronomy and Culture indicates that the codex records the phases of the planet Venus so that the Maya would be certain that their ceremonial events were being held on the correct day. The Maya had a really elaborate ritual set of events that were tied to the calendar," study researcher Geraldo Aldana, a science historian at the University of California, Santa Barbara, told Live Science. They were probably doing large-scale ritual activities connected to the different phases of Venus. Now, for those who don't know, Venus, albeit a very beautiful planet, is often tied to Lucifer. It should also be noted that the Mayans were known to perform the occasional human sacrifice, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that this text most likely contains dates when human sacrifices are to be performed. The Dresden Codex would have acted as an agenda to make sure that our Mayans kept on track with their sacrificial rituals to honor Venus. For this reason, it's thought that this codex is cursed with the souls of those who were sacrificed. It's also very dangerous to perform any of these rituals, as they will likely involve the loss of human life and potentially reaching out to some very dangerous gods. This is the oldest surviving Maya book, and for that reason needs to be kept around for research, but I wouldn't recommend the average person giving it a read. And finally, number 1 on this list is Liber Lineatus. This text is currently considered to be the longest lasting Etruscan text in all of history. It dates back to the 3rd century BCE, and because not much is known about the Etruscan language, it remains mostly untranslated. However, experts who study such things have been able to decipher some of it and have discovered that the text was a ritual calendar, a collection of dates with specific rituals to be performed on said dates. The exact details of these rituals are unknown, but we assume them to be centered around human sacrifices and things of that nature. This is already enough to fear this book, but what makes it inherently cursed is how the pages were used for several thousand years. Mihailo Beric was a low-ranking Croatian official who, in 1848, decided to leave his position and travel to Egypt. While he was there, he decided to purchase a sarcophagus with a mummy inside. Why someone would want a coffin with a preserved dead body in it is beyond me, but apparently this was pretty cool to own back then. Anyways, he takes this mummy back to his home in Vienna and stands it upright in the corner of one of his rooms. It wasn't until after he died though and his brother donated the mummy to the State Institute of Croatia that somebody realized what the mummy was covered with. The bandages that preserved the mummy were covered in writing. These bandages were the Liber Linitus and had been used as rags for this mummy for centuries. Now this text is locked in a refrigerated room in the Archaeological Museum of Croatia, and for good reason. Not only is the writing of this text potentially very dangerous, but people believe that the spirit of this dead mummy haunts the rags and that they're cursed. Those that come into contact with them, or God forbid, read them, could have some very tragic events befall them. For this reason, I highly recommend staying away from the Liber Linitus at all costs.
Number 5 on this list is the Sacred Book of Abramelin the Mage. This book was written by, and yep, you guys guessed it, Abramelin. Abramelin held a belief that every single person had their own unique personal demon within them. Kinda sounds like the guy who's been through a few rough breakups if you ask me. He believed, though, that even though we all had this personal demon, that it could be tamed and it could be controlled. Sort of like this inner power that you have that once you're capable of controlling, it will be very, very strong. If you have this inner demon tamed, then you'll be able to perform supernatural feats and abilities that the average human won't be able to do. That's basically what this book is all about. Taming your inner demon and learning to work with it so that you can harness that power. Then, once you've done so, this book will teach you what sort of powers you're able to perform. Now, this all sounds pretty legendary, actually. I think that everybody would love to be able to channel some magical part of themselves and perform supernatural feats. The book, as with many on this list, though, comes with a downside. If you have this book in your possession, then you're said to be haunted by spirits from another dimension. And these spirits will bring you horrible luck. Maybe if you channel your inner demon quick enough and then get rid of this book, it could be worth it, but something tells me that it's going to take longer than an afternoon to do that, which probably makes this book too dangerous to use. Number 4 on this list is the Arabetel. The Arabetel, or the Arabetel de Magia Veretum, is an ancient text that has some questionable things in it. Although the intentions of this book are good and it may have helped some individuals live a better life, there are dark things in here as well, and the better life can't be said for all people who use this book. Ancient Origins writes, the Arabetel is a Renaissance period grimoire and one of the most influential works of its kind. Unlike some other occult manuscripts that contain dark magic and malicious spells, the Arabetel contains spiritual advice and guidance on how to live an honest and honorable life. The Arabetel is said to have been written in 1575 AD. The author remains unknown, although it's been speculated that it was written by a man named Jacques Gohori. The focus of the Arabetel is on nature and the natural relationships between humanity and a celestial hierarchy. It centers on the positive relationships between the celestial world and humans, and the interaction between the two of them. The Arabetel was an extremely influential work for its time. So as we can see, this ancient text isn't inherently evil in nature, or at least that wasn't its initial intention. However, this book has been connected to some urban legends, and one copy of the text in particular is definitely cursed. It's believed that back in the 1600s, this book fell into the property of a young Polish farmer. The farmer grew obsessed with this book and the dark and malicious spells that it contained. He cursed his rivals and made it so that their crops would never grow. He turned into this evil warlock who the whole region feared. Even though they feared him, they weren't going to give up all hope. The people rose up and attacked this warlock farmer. They killed him, but before he died, he cursed his copy of the Arabetel so that whoever reads it will die within 60 days. Needless to say, the people weren't about to test this guy's curse out, and they hid the copy of the book away. Nowadays, nobody knows where it went, and it could still possibly be out there. So if you do ever pick up one of these texts and give it a read, then you're basically rolling the dice and just hoping that it wasn't that same copy that got cursed. Number 3 on this list is the Book of Soiga. The Book of Soiga is one of the most intriguing books on this list. Humans like things that are hard to come by, things that are rare and often valuable to us. Diamonds are beautiful, but it's actually the rarity and difficulty in finding the diamonds that make them as valuable as they are. Well, the Book of Soiga took a book from those precious stones, and it's definitely hard to come by. The style inspiration says, dating back to the 16th century, the Book of Soiga, also known as the Aldaria, is a Latin essay about demonology with only 2 known copies in existence. One was owned by the scholar John Dee, and his elder brother devoted his entire life to decoding the Book of Soiga. Though he successfully determined that the book was full of dark rituals and incantations, he struggled to figure out the final 36 pages. His obsession with figuring out the content of those final pages drove Dee to insanity. Obsessed, he even hired a medium to summon the Archangel Uriel to help with the translation. Speaking through Dee's medium, Uriel apparently explains that the book came into existence when Adam ended paradise and that it could only be interpreted by Archangel Michael. After Dee's death, the book was thought long lost until 2 copies were found in 1994. Since then, many have been tempted to try and complete these works, but it comes with a serious risk. According to legend, anyone who successfully deciphers those final pages is destined to die in under 3 years. So dying in 3 years obviously isn't the best, but the good part about this is because it's so rare, it's pretty unlikely to stumble on this book and give it a read. This is like a legendary Pokemon of cursed books though, so if you do ever come across it, don't read it, but definitely scoop it up and put that thing on eBay. In that case, the Book of Soiga might actually be a blessing. Number 2 on this list is The Lesser Key of Solomon. This book is so cursed that it doesn't even need to be read to curse you. Literally just being in its proximity can do the trick. Slapped Ham writes, The Lesser Key of Solomon, also known as the Clavica Solomon's Regis, is a cursed grimoire of demonology. Its original authors are unknown, and it's said to be comprised of texts compiled sometime in the 17th century. The book contains passages on how to conjure spirits of the dead and demons and how to control these entities to do your bidding. Curses and invocations also play a large role in the ancient text. Esoteric topics like how to become invisible and locate missing or stolen items are covered. Recipes for love potions and liquors of persuasion are also scattered throughout the book. This definitely isn't the book you want to own. It's reportedly so cursed that it will doom anyone who keeps a copy on their bookshelf. Those who've owned it have reported strange occurrences like pages turning on their own and books violently flying across the room. Strange whispers and shadow creatures have also been reported by owners of the manual. Owning the Lesser Key of Solomon is also believed to bring about catastrophic bad luck. It's said that the only way to break the book's curse is to burn the pages and properly dispose of the ashes. Finally, someone making some sense. How many times have I gone on this channel and talked about how we just need to start burning things? Cursed books, cursed houses, cursed objects. Screw all of it, let's just burn it. At the end of the day, this stuff is really cool, but I'm not out here trying to have my life ruined by some weird book. Burn it hot and let's be done with it. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Codex Gigas. Codex Gigas is one of the closest things that we have to a Bible for the devil. And anything that carries a weight to it like that needs to be on this list. The Style Inspiration says, at 92 centimeters, the Codex Gigas is the largest extant medieval illuminated manuscript in the world. Just like everything evil, it comes with 2 names, and the Codex Gigas' second name is more than a little foreboding: the Devil's Bible. The history of the book is heavy to say the least. It was written by a monk who had broken his spiritual vows, and for his crime, the monk was sentenced to die entombed behind a brick wall. The night before his death, the monk began chronicling everything he knew about the human experience in a book. So, the story goes, realizing he wouldn't have time to finish it, he apparently summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete the project in exchange for his soul. The book was then allegedly completed by the devil himself. It's overflowing with dark rituals and imagery, and even includes 19-inch drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. Now, obviously, because this was written by the devil, there are some side effects from reading the thing. People have reported watching their friends become possessed as they read it. Now, it's currently on display for people to go take a look at the National Library of Sweden. But be very careful if you ever do go take a look, because clearly, this is the work of the devil.
Number 5, The Great Omar. The Great Omar was a one-of-a-kind, tailor-made collection of Omar Khayyam's poetry. So if you're looking to score this at your local Barnes & Noble, you might have a bit of trouble. It was commissioned by the owner of a British bookshop, whose sole request was that it would be the greatest modern binding in the world. You know, nothing too lofty though. The book itself is made of 5,000 pieces of leather, 1,000 different gemstones, 100 square feet of gold, and some pages too, I guess. I think there's poetry inside there. The final book was priced for roughly $150,000 after finishing. So it's a pretty expensive book. But what makes it so cursed? Well, when the Great Omar was purchased, it was bought by an American buyer and had to take a transatlantic trip on a little ship called the Titanic, a boat which, as far as I know, has never been involved in any sort of historical events of note whatsoever. The Great Omar was never recovered from the wreckage and sank with the ship. 10 weeks after the book kissed the ocean floor, the man who bound it, Francis Sangorski, drowned while on vacation at only the age of 37. A little suspicious, isn't it? A bookbinder in the 1930s tried to recreate the Great Omar, Stanley Bray. He finished the second iteration just in time for World War II to begin. The book was placed in a vault on London's Fore Street, which was one of the first sites to be bombed. I guess they heard about the book. The safe that held the book endured through the Blitz, but the safe's contents and the second Great Omar was incinerated and lost to the war. A third version has been crafted and is currently being held in a vault in the British Library, although given the book's history, I don't feel like I would be too comfortable spending any time around it if I didn't have to. Hey, liking what we do here at Top 5 Scary? Well, we always love a little subscribe. Toss one our way. Number 4, The Grand Grimoire. Another book you're probably gonna have some trouble finding on Amazon. The Grand Grimoire is a tome of black magic. No one can agree on when the grimoire was originally birthed into this world, with people claiming that it could have been written anywhere from the 15th century to the 19th century. No one knows who even wrote the Grand Grimoire. Perhaps it merely appeared one day from another world, tantalizing and asking to be read. Some urban legends claim that the book was written by a man possessed by the devil himself, acting as a vessel for his will to pen his musings. The book itself contains instructions for would-be warlocks to summon all manner of demons and sinister servants of the underworld, even including guides on how a fledgling necromancer could learn how to raise a spirit from the dead. Now, if all that sounds appealing to you, it's said that even so much as cracking the spine of the Grand Grimoire is enough to seal your soul to damnation, the literary equivalent of promising your soul to the underworld. The church, obviously, sought out to quell the rising threat of the Grand Grimoire's dark musings, and it is said that the original Grand Grimoire, gosh, that is fun to say, is currently being held sealed in the Vatican's legendary vault, where it shall never again be seen by prying eyes, or those wishing to uncover its many dark secrets. There are alleged excerpts that have been reprinted and made available, but the full Grand Grimoire itself hasn't been seen by anyone in what would be centuries. Perhaps for good reason too. I mean, if the myths and legends around the book are to be believed. Number 3, The Book of Abramelin. The Book of Abramelin, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sure one of you ghouls and goblins will let me know, or the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, if you're not into that whole brevity thing, is an allegedly magic text that is thought to have been written at some point during the 14th century. It wasn't until the 19th century that it became recognized for its power, when the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn translated the book into English in the late 1890s. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and you're wondering which Final Fantasy that's from, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was a secret society devoted to the study of the occult and spiritual development. From here, the book became a key text in occultism, supposedly even inspiring Aleister Crowley's system of magic. So what's inside the book? Any pop-ups? The book centers around an incredibly elaborate ritual aimed at allowing a practicing sorcerer to communicate with their holy guardian angel. The book theorizing that everyone has their own personal guardian angel, a celestial other half from another world, if you will. After the sorcerer summons their guardian angel and enjoys a honeymoon phase, the book describes a period of blissful intimacy, one needs to conquer every unredeemed spirit of the infernal regions, which sounds like a bit of a task. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of unredeemed spirit. Luckily, I think the angel helps out a bit. If the legends are true, then undoubtedly the information in this book isn't the kind of thing that should ever be falling into the wrong hands. I mean, that's just a general good piece of life advice. As a general rule of thumb, you shouldn't mess with demons unless you know what you're doing, okay? That's the kind of thing to leave up to professionals. For all of our sakes, you know? Number 2, the Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript is one of the more interesting books on this list. It's named after the first public owner of it, Wilfrid Voynich. Unlike most of these cursed banned books, the Voynich Manuscript is actually something you can seek out and read via Yale University's online collection, and you are more than welcome to peer over its pages, although you might find it a bit of a difficult text to read, because the Voynich manuscript is written in a language that no human being speaks or has ever spoken. Carbon dating suggests the manuscript was first written at some unspecified time during the 14th century, and all 240 of the manuscript's pages are written completely unintelligibly. So if you want to take a look at this thing and try and help us crack this, please be my guest. Adorning its pages are confusing illustrations that only serve to further its mysterious reputation, with most of the drawings looking like a cross between a Hieronymus Bosch painting and a fever dream kaleidoscope nightmare. The book has made its way through countless owners, a succession of kings and other powerful leaders, and yet in all the years of its existence, no one has even come remotely close to understanding just what the Voynich manuscript is, where it came from, and what its purpose is. Is it cursed? Well, it's possible. Maybe it contains the instructions for all manner of demonic and occult magic, and we just don't know how to read it yet. There are some people who believe that the Voynich manuscript could have been written by an extraterrestrial entity and gifted to us. And there's even some legends that claim the manuscript has some sort of apocalyptic curse hidden inside its mysterious scrawlings. We might never know, unless you might be the one to crack it for us. Number 1, Codex Gigas. Codex Gigas, Gigas, one of you guys will tell me, I'm sure. Oft referred to as the Devil's Bible, is the biggest entry on this list. And not just for its renown. No, it's like literally the biggest entry on this list. It's 3 feet tall and weighs around 80 pounds. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the curse this book inflicts on you is a hernia. The Codex Gigas, which literally translates to giant book, is a medieval manuscript dating back to the 12th century. So what's the deal with the Codex Gigas? Well, legends tell the Codex was penned by a monk who had broken his vows, and to repent for his sins, he was sentenced to be walled up alive. He promised, as an apology, that he would write a powerful book to glorify the monastery, and his book would contain all known human knowledge at that point. Everything. The original Wikipedia, and he wasn't even asking for donations. The legend continues that the monk, realizing that this task was a bit lofty, even for the quickest of scribes, reached out for some help co-authoring his mighty manuscript. He reached out and prayed, but not from God, but instead from Lucifer, asking for help finishing the book in exchange for his eternal soul. I'm starting to understand why he was sentenced for breaking his vows. Not really the best plan if you're looking to redeem yourself in the eyes of the church by making a deal with the devil, but hey, we've all done pretty crazy things trying to make a deadline. I totally get it. It's said that Lucifer himself helped complete the book, and the monk drew a portrait of the devil himself as thanks. That's where the book gets its name, the Devil's Bible. The book is replete with occultism, dark rituals, and imagery. I mean, after all, it's said to contain the entirety of the knowledge of the human race up to this point. So who's to speak what sort of sinister secrets are kept between its giant pages? There were estimates and tests to try and recreate the manuscript, suggesting that even one man writing, without illustrations, would have taken the better part of 2 decades to write the calligraphy present inside that book. So did this monk have some otherworldly help? Maybe just a huge stack of Red Bull? And what is inside this book? If your Latin's any good, the manuscript is kept on display in the National Library of Stockholm. Just be careful what you read. You got no idea what you could bring into this world.
In 5th place, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon, also known as Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis, or simply Lemegeton. This is probably the book on this list that I'm personally most familiar with. I've definitely referenced it more than once for y'all, since it has some great info on demons and their personalities. For simplicity's sake, I'll just refer to it as the Key today. The Key is an anonymously authored grimoire on demonology that was compiled in the mid-17th century, mostly from materials up to 7 centuries older. It's divided into 5 books: Ars Goetia, Ars Thurgia Goetia, Ars Paulina, Ars Almadel, and Ars Notoria. The Key is based on the Testament of Solomon and the ring mentioned within it that he uses to seal demons. While most of us know specifically the Ars Goetia for, the 72 demons listed in the ranking, and I promise I'll get to the highlight reel in a moment. Now, while I don't have a technical definition for Ars, the Latin term Goetia refers to the evocation of demons or evil spirits, and is derived from an ancient Greek word meaning charm, witchcraft, or jugglery. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, Goetia was generally considered evil and heretical, in contrast to Theurgia and Magia Naturalis, or natural magic, which were sometimes considered more noble. Okay, the 72 demons I promised. I promise I won't bore y'all and list them all, but some notable ones include King Baal, Duke Velfor, King Beleth, Duke Berith, Duke Astaroth, King Asmodeus, King or Count Fine, and Samael. paranormal. The Ars Thurgia Goetia mostly references Trithemius's Steganographia, though the seals and order of the spirits are different due to corrupted transmission via manuscript. Rituals not found in Stenographia were added, and in some ways conflicting with similar rituals found in the Ars Goetia and Ars Paulina. Most of the spirits summoned are tied to compass points. 4 emperors are tied to the cardinal points of Carnisiel in the east, Amenadiel in the west, Demoriel in the north, and Caspiel in the south. And 16 dukes are tied to cardinal points, intercardinal points, and additional directions between those. There are in addition 11 wandering princes, so that a total of 31 spirit leaders each rule between several to a few dozen spirits. The Ars Paulina is derived from Book 3 of Trithemius's Stenographia and from portions of the Heptameron, but delivered by Paul the Apostle. Elements from the magical calendar, astrological seals by Robert Turner's 1656 translation of Paracelsus's Archidoxes of Magic, and the year 1641 indicate that this portion was written in the later half of the 17th century. Traditions of Paul communicating with heavenly powers are almost as old as Christianity itself, as seen in some interpretations of Corinthians and the apocryphal Apocalypse of Paul. Now, the Ars Paulina is divided into 2 books, the first detailing 24 angels aligned with the 24 hours of the day, while the second detailing the 360 spirits of the degrees of the zodiac. The Ars Amadel instructs the magician on how to create a wax tablet with specific designs intended to contact angels via scrying. And finally, the Ars Notoria contains a series of prayers intended to grant eidetic memory and instantaneous learning to the magician. Pretty dang thorough. In 4th place, we have the Grand Grimoire. It's a black magic grimoire, and for reference, a grimoire is a textbook of magic that typically, includes instructions on how to create magical objects like talismans and amulets, how to perform magical spells, charms and divination, and how to summon or invoke supernatural entities such as angels, spirits, deities, and demons. In many cases, the books themselves are believed to be imbued with magical powers, although in many cultures, other sacred texts that are not grimoires, such as the Bible, have been believed to have supernatural properties intrinsically. Now, the only contents found in a grimoire would be information on spells, rituals, the preparation of magical tools, and lists of ingredients, and their magical correspondences. In this manner, while all books on magic could be thought of as grimoires, not all magical books should be thought of as grimoires. Different editions date the specific one to 1521, 1522, or 1421, but it was probably written during the early 19th century. Some experts suggest that 1702 is when the first edition may have been created, and a Bibliothèque Bleue version, similar to a chapter book, of the text may have been published in 1750. Now, the introductory chapter was authored by Antonia Venetiana del Rabina, who gathered his information from the original writings of King Solomon. Much of the material of this grimoire derives from the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon, which, are grimoires attributed to King Solomon. Also known as Le Dragon Rouge, or the Red Dragon, this book contains instructions on how to summon Lucifer, or Lucifege Rofocal, for the purpose of forming a deal with the devil. The 19th century French occultist Eliphas Lévy, author of Dogmes et Rituels de la Haute Magie, claimed the contemporary edition of Le Dragon Rouge was a counterfeit of a true older Grand Grimoire. Gosh, I love petty historical spats. Now, the overall work is divided into 2 books. The first book contains instructions for summoning a demon and for the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. The second book is divided further into 2 more parts: the Sanctum Regnum and Secrets de l'Art Magique du Grand Grimoire. The Sanctum Regnum contains instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without the tools required by Book 1, but at greater risk. Secrets contains simple spells and rituals one can employ after having performed the ritual of the first book. Some editions contain a short text between these 2 parts, known as Le Secret Magique ou Le Grand Art de Pouvoir Parler aux Morts, or in English, The Magic Secret or the Grand Art of Being Able to Speak with the Dead, which deals with necromancy. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact with them. It also details several spells for winning a lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, making oneself invisible, and more. This book mentions the 3 greater demons, which are similarly prioritized in the Grimorium Verum. Sidebar: in the English translation of the work, the demons are referred to by the more generic term of spirits, which is a term I know some modern Satanists tend to prefer. The demons that are mentioned are the Emperor Lucifer, Prince Beelzebub, and Grand Duke Astaroth. Now, this work also makes mention of 6 lesser demons, and of course I'll mention them all. Lucifege Rofocal, Prime Minister; Satan Nachia, Commander-in-Chief; Agliarept, Commandant; Fleurity, Lieutenant General; Sargatanas, Brigadier Major; Nebulos, Marshal, and Inspector General. In 3rd place, we have the Complete Book of Demonolatry. Written by S. Connolly, it boasts telling the reader how to discover powerful rites, magic, and practices that honor Satan and the demons. Now, this text, used by the traditional demonolatry priesthood to train members of their covens, is part workbook, part textbook, and part reference book. It includes thorough chapters on demonology, history, demonic holy days, offerings, prayers, sigils, religious rites, and an introduction to demonology magic. Okay, this might be the first book I'm actually tempted to buy for myself. If only just to learn more about like demonology history from someone that isn't Ed Warren for once. I love the Warrens and their work, but at the same time, it would be kind of neat to learn from a lens that isn't, as biased in Catholicism. Let's see what else it advertises. Learn how and why the ends, demonology sigils, ascension, and many other demonology methods have become standard practice among many theistic Satanists. It claims to guide students from pre-initiate to adept. It even delves into the depths of demonology, sex magic, necromancy, scarlet elixir rites, and red fluid sacrifice. See, that entire last phrase I can do without. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Should I bother investing in it or not? In second place, we have the Grimorium Verum. The Grimorium Verum, which is Latin for true grimoire, is an 18th century grimoire attributed to one Alabek the Egyptian of Memphis, who wrote it in 1517. Like many grimoires, it claims a tradition originating with King Solomon. The grimoire is not a translation of an earlier work, with its original appearing in French or Italian in the mid-18th century, as noted already by A.E. Waite, who discussed the work in his book of ceremonial magic in 1911, stating that the date specified in the title of Grimorium Verum is undeniably fraudulent, since the work belongs to the middle of the 18th century and Memphis is Rome. Alrighty. One version of the grimoire was included as the Clavicles of King Solomon, Book 3, in one of the French manuscripts S. L. McGregor Mathers incorporated in his version of the Key of Solomon, but it was omitted from the key with his explanation. That apparently at the end there are some short extracts from the Grimorium Verum with the seals of evil spirits, which, as they do not belong to the Key of Solomon proper, I have not given. For the evident classification of the key is in 2 books and no more. I just love feuds. H.R. Shaw also published some of it in The Secret Lore of Magic, the Book of Sorcerers in 1957. Alrighty, time to break down all 4 books. So book 1 is described as concerning the character of demons, particularly the superior spirits of Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth, while also including the many inferior spirits below them and their invoking sigils. Who wants to hear about what all the lesser spirits can do? Klonek has the power to bring money to those who make a pact with him. Musissin has power over important people and politicians. Frymost has power over women. Kleppoth can help you experience all sorts of dreams and visions. Kill can manifest dramatic situations and changes. Mersild has dominion over long and short distance travel. Clisthard can create confusion or enlightenment, depending on what you need. Serchade can make you see all sorts of natural and supernatural creatures. Hickpath can make a person think of you, no matter how far or distant they may be. Humans can bring you any book you desire. Seagal will cause all sorts of prodigies to appear. Prukissier can teach you the art of necromancy. Guland causes all illnesses. Sergak can create every kind of opportunity for advancement. Moriel can help you move about unseen. Frutimier prepares all kinds of feasts for you. Huigi Tigras, I tried, causes sleep in the case of some and insomnia in others. Tempting. I could use a good night's sleep. Book 2 is simply described as being of planetary hours, so I'll leave that up to y'all to interpret what you think it means. Book 3 is the preparation of the operator, or more simply put, how to prepare for summoning. A more modern title could be, Demon Summoning for Dummies, or How to Summon a Demon 101. Just saying. Book 4 contains the Sanctum Regnum, called the Royalty of Spirits, or the Little Key of Solomon, a most learned Hebraic necromancer and rabbi. Gee, where have I referenced that before? This book contains various combinations of characters where the powers can be invoked or brought forth whensoever you may wish, each according to his faculty. Long story short, it's a very descriptive and thorough demon summoning Bible, if you will. Once again, I personally do not recommend summoning demons, but if you really feel like you must, this feels like it would produce safer outcomes than, say, a random YouTube ritual or Ouija board. Okay, anything's better than a cursed board, but this one I feel like I can kind of endorse and still sleep at night, you know? In first place, we have the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic. The MMDM, or Libel Incantionum, Exorcism Memoriam e Fascinatorium Variarium, is a 15th century grimoire manuscript. The text, composed in Latin, is largely concerned with demonology and necromancy. Richard Kiekefer edited the text of the manuscript in 1998 under the title Forbidden Rites, a necromancer's manual of the 15th century. Portions of the text in English translation are presented in Forbidden Rites as well, embedded within the author's essays and explanations on the Munich Manual in specific and grimoires in general. The Russian translation of this Latin grimoire was published in 2019, while the first English translation was published in only 2023. There is only one known surviving manuscript of the original Munich Manual, which is almost complete, except for the first 2 folios that describe the beginning of the first ritual. The rest of the grimoire contains complete instructions for the invocation of demons, such as Satan, Lilith, Astaroth, and Samael, as well as the supposed attainment of favors and supernatural powers from them. Some of the spells allow for obtaining the love of a woman, achieving invisibility, acquiring wealth and treasures, or gaining knowledge. The text is accompanied by over 40 illustrations of magic circles and symbols to be used in the ritual. Pages 130 to 133 of the text include a list of 11 demons, similar to the one from the Ars Goetia. Since there are only 11, I suppose I could list them all off. Count/Duke Barbarous, Duke Cassin, President/Count Odious, King Curson, Duke Alugor, Prince Teob, President Fulak, Duke Ganeron, Marquis Tuvaris, and President Hani. Oh, and Marquis Sukax. I promise I did my best with pronunciations. Most of the text is in Latin, with the exception of 2 appended materials in German and Italian. Makes sense to me. Anyone feel like learning a dead language?